Hello, I'm Joe Dowden and I'm going to show you how to paint water and make it look wet. We'll be using a few techniques and we'll be keeping it simple. I'm going to use two photographs. One of them basically shows the scene and another gives us a very interesting little reference for the light. Now you'll also notice that I've got a very light sketchy drawing, hardly anything in fact, just knocked in very loosely. Well, the first thing I'm going to do now is mask the sunshine, mask the sun itself, that is, and its reflection. I'm using masking fluid and a colour shaper, very neat little tool, very easy to use. And you might not be able to see them here. I've got the faintest marks possible where I'm going to put the masking fluid. That's the sun. And now, watch this, because there's a streak, a vertical streak in the water, just going straight down below the sun. At the bottom, it just breaks up like this into a few marks. That gives us the idea of ripples and waves, and later on it'll give us this really wet, syrupy sunshine reflection. The masking fluid's dry now. The next thing we do is mix the colour for the first wash. What I'm going to do is use Naples yellow as the base colour. There's some burnt sienna at the ready. That's going to add a little bit of warmth. Just to add an element of grey, I'm going to be using some cobalt blue. There's one more colour, and that's cadmium yellow. Now the next thing I'm going to do is apply water. I'm going to use a big flat brush here, very easy to use. Just brush the water straight on, right across the image, right across the dry masking fluid. Now making sure that's all nicely covered. Now I'll put that away. Got a slightly smaller flat brush, very useful for applying this colour, and I'm just going to start by applying the Naples yellow. Now look at that. It's a pale colour, but Naples yellow is an interesting colour. It's got tremendous covering power. Brushing it across the sky, and I'm going to keep it a little bit lighter in the area of the sun and also above the sun. There's a lot of sunlight spreading into the sky, so I'll be keeping the colour just a little bit paler around the area of the sun. Brush it in as fast as possible. And of course the masking fluid is really going to protect the areas of the painting that we don't want covered. Later on they're going to show up as bright white paper, whiter than the white of the paper. Now while this is still wet, I'm going to just add a little bit of cadmium yellow. This is going to start building warmth into the image. And it can be surprisingly rough and ready. You can see brush strokes there, but they'll disappear because the water will tend to diffuse them. Now finally, we're going to add a little bit of burnt sienna, and then we're going to go in with the blue. Again, the brush strokes are quite rough. The water will spread them out. But also, we're going to be putting this burnt sienna, this very warm brown, lower down in the image. The water darkens at the bottom of the image and we'll start to build that darkness in. Now again, look how rough all those lines are, and yet we will end up with a very smooth finish. Now that's the last stage, except we're just going to start to add just a touch of blue. As soon as you put the blue into this burnt sienna, it takes on a subtle grey. That'll do for that, but there's just one more little hint before we finish this stage. A fan blender, very useful for just spreading colour and just make it that little bit smoother, and that's all we really need to do. And we've now completed our initial light washes protected by the masking fluid, and we've got this painting underway. All I need to do now is dry it. Now that's dry, I'm ready for the next stage. Blow a bit of that dust off. And I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to wet it with clean water and add another layer of colour. So here we go again. Big brush, clean water, brush it on, just like a decorating job. Very simple. Cover the whole paper. There we are. That's just about complete. Now, I've got some colour here that I've already put on the palette. Alizarin Crimson and Viridian. Now that's the colour that I'll be putting on after I've spread some of the initial Naples yellow onto this water. So here we go again. I'm adding a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of Naples yellow straight into the mix and brushing it straight on. Brushing it just around the sun there so that that will now show up the shape of the sun when it dries. Now the same applies lower down, more of this colour going in. And again, we now use our darker colour, this warm brown, burnt sienna. So we're kind of using the Naples yellow almost as a medium to paint into, almost like the water itself. We're brushing the colour across, and notice how the sky is darkest at its edges, away from the sun. Now I just want to get a clean brush, bit of clean water, push that colour back away from the sun, and near the sun, intense yellow light. So I'm just going to put some cadmium yellow just around the sun itself, and also a little bit around the reflection. And now we blend that back in to the rest of the colour. Again, I'm using burnt sienna, applying that to the rest of the image. Just remember, it's very simple, nothing is really crucial. It's just a matter of getting the colour down fairly quickly. And we start to intensify the colour in the foreground. Now, it's darkest at the bottom, and as I spread it up, it gets paler. Now the next thing is to use these two colours, crimson and green. This is alizarin crimson and Viridian. Mix them together, and that's how we're going to create the subtle greys that run through this image, the clouds and some of the darks. So the paper's still wet, so if I run the colour across like that, it will form these gorgeous, soft patches of colour. Either side of the sun, they're dark. Where they get near to the sun, we need a little bit more burnt sienna for this. They're warmed by the colour of the sun. The colour is bleached out by the strength of light from the sun. And then as the cloud gets right up to the sun, just add a bit of cadmium lemon. So we've got the sun literally shining through a gap in the cloud. Now we can do another more distant swathe of cloud, perhaps narrower, further away, working in from the outer edges toward the sunshine. And the same principle applies again. As it gets nearer the sun, add the burnt sienna, and then add the cadmium yellow. Now finally, we'll put some swathes of cloud in at the top, and I'll add a little bit of blue. It'll tend to just shift it ever so slightly toward violet, acting with the red. We just put these clouds in across the top. Look at that, just single brush strokes. That's all that's needed. And again, where they cross the path of the sunshine, above the sun, add a warming colour, in this case just a bit of burnt sienna. And then here, underneath these lower clouds, I'm going to add more intense grey. So we're basically building this up with two colours, crimson and green. And that puts the tone underneath the cloud. Now the lower part of the image is still wet, and again with a larger brush, I'll start with this flat brush, I'll probably go on to a larger round brush. We apply the colour to the bottom of the image. Same colours again, we've got this beautiful harmonious grey made of complementary colours. Look at that. Very dark, intense tone from crimson and green going on to the water. Again, it's darkest further away from the sun's reflection, and this is what is going to help put the brightness into the sunshine, like this. Well, I've got the colour on there. Now I just want to go back to it and smooth it through a little bit. Again, using a wet brush, a piece of tissue paper, clean water, and try and keep a smooth graduation into this patch of light around the reflection itself. Remember, the reflection is reflecting the sun, but the light area is reflecting the light patch of sky around the sun. Well, it doesn't quite end there. I can now go back to it and put really dark colour into the water. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'll use a large round brush for this. I can mix the colour on the palette with a round brush, and I can take it straight off the palette and onto the image without any difficulties. Now look how dark that is. You would think that would be too dark to put onto a watercolour painting. And it's virtually black, but of course we know that it's mixed from crimson and green. And now I'm working up the sides of the image, making the colour, making the tone much more intense. The further it is away from the sun, the darker the colour. Even more dark colour going on. Brushing it on in lines. It'll smooth out in the water. This is really a matter of just getting the colour on. You can actually see the green and the crimson on the paper next to each other. Finish it off by putting this dark, dark tone right down in the base of the image. The water is darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Just a couple more marks to finish it off. Colour brushed straight into the still wet wash of water. And a few stripes of colour below the clouds for the cloud reflections. A little bit of burnt sienna going in there. Now there we are. All I need to do is dry it.